In your training as an MMA fighter, of course you must work on your takedown defense, but that doesn't mean you should leave your bottom game to chance. In your MMA career, it's unrealistic to think that you will never be taken down, or that at some point you might lose position and end up on your back. And when that moment comes, you need to be prepared. But this video is not only about techniques that you can use when you're on bottom, it's also about reframing an idea that can be very dangerous and can cause you a fight if you don't understand it properly. When we talk about the bottom position in MMA, you should not try to attack from there with strikes or submissions. Your number one priority should always be to either reverse the position so you end up on top, or escape and get back to your feet. Many fighters operate on the ground with a BJJ mindset, and that's fine within the sport of BJJ. But inside of the cage, you must change the way you operate because strikes on the ground are allowed. Fighting from the top or the bottom, it's not good or bad per se. The problem is which of the two fighters has greater ability to generate effective damage, and the fighter who's on top will always have the advantage because they can create space upward to strike, while the fighter on bottom is limited by the ground beneath them and cannot create the same space. That's why, as I said before, your priority must always be to either reverse the position with a sweep or to escape and get back to your feet. For example, George here has full guard. He has a collar tie and an overhook to break Alves' posture, which prevents Alves from sitting upright and generating power in his strikes. The problem is that because they're very close, George cannot escape because Alves' weight is on top of him. George needs to create space to escape from here, so watch what he does. Alves uses a shoulder frame. With this, he begins to regain posture and prepares his left hand to strike. As this happens, George opens his guard and inserts his knee, establishing distance. This technique is called the knee shield, which he uses to frame and keep Alves away. Now, if he stands up without being careful, he runs the risk of Alves taking him down again. So he uses another technique called the hip heist or technical stand-up, which consists of placing only your hand and foot on the ground and using the leg that has no weight on it to swing it back and stand up quickly. By the way, just as a side note, I'm currently building a private community for MMA fighters who want to learn how to think better inside the cage. There, we go deeper into bottomscapes, decision making under pressure, and more in-depth breakdowns. I'll be sharing more details in future videos if you want to be part of it. Now, let's get back to the video. Of course, there are fighters like Charles Oliveira who can attack from the bottom and be effective, but even they understand that staying on the bottom is a risk. Arm bars, triangles, and many other submissions you can do from your back can work. The problem is trying to finish them from the bottom position, where your opponent has a greater ability to land strikes on you while you try to complete them, and trust me, you don't want that. In MMA, the ground is not neutral, and if you treat the sport of mixed martial arts like it's jiu-jitsu, you're playing to lose. I'm not saying you shouldn't train jiu-jitsu. I strongly believe that an MMA fighter should train the martial arts separately. One day wrestling, another day boxing, another day jiu-jitsu. What I'm saying is that those martial arts, when trained separately, must be adapted to MMA. In jiu-jitsu, they teach you to fight from the bottom, but with assumptions that don't exist in MMA. Strikes don't exist, and the guard is considered a neutral position. In MMA, the guard should be your emergency position, not your offensive base. Now, what happens when you're on bottom against the fence and you can't create space to escape? Once again, let's look at GSP. In his fight against Matt Hughes, Matt has George trapped on bottom against the cage, in an unpleasant position. You have very little space to move and escape. Your opponent can throw ground and pound, and Matt has George pinned with a crossface. He has him completely neutralized in half guard. So you find yourself here. What do? What George actually does here is that he uses the cage to his advantage. He places his hand and his foot on the fence, and he blocks Matt's right knee so he can't post. Now he's going to create space by bridging and pushing up with his hand. He manages to get Matt off him, and to finish, he uses a wizard to get back to his feet. The cage is just an element. It's not either good or bad. It depends on how you use it and how your opponent uses it against you. Getting trapped on the bottom against the fence usually is a terrible position, but GSP manages to use it on his favor. Here's another example. DJ is in bottom side control against the fence, a terrible position. Bridging is not really an option because his opponent is heavier than him. So what he does is that he's gonna connect his elbow and his knee on Pickett's hip. This is called an elbow escape. Now that he has his barrier, what he will do is use it to push himself, but he cannot escape to his left because the cage is on that side. So he pushes himself downward and looks for an underhook on this side. In this way he can slide more easily and free his hips to get back to his feet once again. This is also called a side control escape to single leg, but DJ blends both techniques in a brilliant way. So next time you find yourself on bottom, the question should not be what submission can I get? The question should be how do I get out of here while taking the least amount of damage possible? That question alone will change the way you see the fight and the way you look for strategies to win.